Chip Tam and football? That's what Pittsburgh does? Oh, wait, this is the new show. Sorry, no fancy interview the way that Chris Carter always does it. But obviously you've got your old North Shore Drive podcast duo here with you on this Friday morning. I'm Brian Batko, Ray Fittipaldo joining me, my beat partner on the Steelers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as you might have guessed, we are going to talk all Steelers, all NFL, all Super Bowl today. Ray, what's going on, man?
Not too much, Brian. How you enjoying the offseason so far?
It's all right. It's been, a little bit sleepy here these last couple weeks after the Steelers obviously didn't make many moves, made our lives easier, didn't exactly make the fans happy, but it's getting into full swing. As you know, we'll have free agency stuff ramping up over the next few weeks. Draft season is already in full swing. You were down in Mobile, and then you'll be going out to Indy for the combine. So it should be fun. And one of the main pillars of any Steelers offseason calendar at the Post-Gazette is Ray Fittipaldo's first mock draft. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, especially in this first segment. Are you ready to do it, Ray? Are you ready to defend your picks? I should pull up the angry comments from readers and have you defend those right here on the show.
I know there are like close to 100 comments on that story. I think half of them, Brian, were who is this guy? Or he's going to go in the second round.
Who, you or your picks?
Yeah, probably both, right?
Yeah. Okay, but that always makes for good discussion, of course. We'll talk about your first pick at length because you always got to get that first rounder correct. And we know that this year in particular, the Steelers are picking 17th overall, higher than usual. Yes, they got Devin Bush 10th overall in 2019, but they had to trade up to do that. So this is big for them. And, they've got a lot of needs, even once filled on offense these last couple years, which is why I assume you went on the defensive side of the ball with a guy who, as you put it, already looks like a Steeler, not because of his physique or anything like that, but simply the jersey he wears in college. From the Iowa Hawkeyes, we'll call him defensive lineman / edge rusher. More on that later. Lukas Van Ness. Ray, go ahead and give me the, quick skinny on, I know when you do this, you're listening to people that you trust in the scouting community. You're watching film yourself. You were down at the Senior Bowl, like I said. This guy wasn't there, unless I'm mistaken. So what made Lukas Van Ness jump off either the YouTube to you or from what you've read, what made him stand out for you to make him your first rounder for the Steelers?
He looks like a Steelers typical defensive end 5 technique, Brian. If you watch Iowa games, and I always try to watch them against the best competition. So,
some people consider it a war crime to make people watch Iowa football in 2022. But if you're
their
a
offense, right? That's their offense, right? Yeah. Their defense actually wasn't halfway bad. They got Jack Campbell. They got some other guys who are going to get drafted too. He's got a great bull rush, Brian. He is strong, even though he's only a redshirt sophomore and doesn't turn 22 until the summer. This guy is really, really strong. I think he could step into an NFL defense right now and contribute right away. Now, he's only listed at 275, so I think, we had the Marvin Leal come in last year, and everyone was wondering, okay, he's kind of skinny. Where's he going to go? So, Lukas Van Ness could be that type of a guy who plays up and down the line, or he could be a guy who just adds 15 pounds, and he's your prototypical Cam Hayward, Aaron Smith type of defensive end. So, that is to be determined. I think he would have to learn how to be a more consistent pass rusher. You're not going to be able to bull rush everyone in the NFL. He's going to have to get more diverse. Obviously, when you're that young and you only played in college for 2 seasons, you're going to have to become a more seasoned run defender too. But just looking at his potential, and when you draft a guy in the first round, I think a lot of times, Brian, you're trying to project what that guy's going to be 2, 3, 5 years down the road. Lukas Van Ness probably has as much upside as anyone in this draft.
What about the argument that for as much as it's nice to have that potential, the Steelers need a guy right now to help at that spot? And, can Van Ness can he shed that label of being kind of a tweener? I mean, that's one of the funny things, I guess, about draft chatter every year. If you like a player, you call him a hybrid, versatile guy. If you don't like a player, you call him a tweener, and you worry about his long-term fit in the NFL. Did you have any concerns about, okay, what is his best role? Is he going to stand up on the edge and be the number 3 outside linebacker for a while? Is he going to be able to, say, play next to Cam Hayward with his hand in the dirt in the nickel package? What are your kind of general thoughts on what Van Ness can do? I guess my point, Ray, is whoever you use this first-round pick on better be somebody who's going to help you on the field and be part of your best 11 more often than not in 2023.
I think he can be that, Brian, but I don't know that he has to be. So I envision him as a 5 technique. I think that would be his best position. And you said come in and be a starter right away. Well, Cam Hayward's back. We'll see what happens with Larry Ogunjobi. But if Larry Ogunjobi is re-signed, let's say on another 1-year deal, there's no reason that Lukas Van Ness can't play 25, 30, 35 snaps a game and sort of learn the NFL the way Cam Hayward did. I think there's value in that. And I understand the way the NFL is set up now. When you're picking in the first and second rounds, you do want to get guys who start right away, or at the very least contribute right away. And I get that. And I don't think there's no reason that Lukas Van Ness can't do that. But I don't necessarily see a scenario where he has to play 85, 90% of the snaps either. Sometimes that's just not good for the development of a young guy, especially a guy who's coming out after his redshirt sophomore year. So I understand what you're saying.
Do you feel like he's too similar of a player to DeMarvin Leal? Do you think the Steelers would be overlapping a little bit here if they make this move after getting Leal in the 3rd round last year?
No, I don't think so. I think Leal is like a chess piece. You actually can play him at edge rusher. He could be an outside linebacker in that defense. He could play 3 technique. He could play 5 technique. You move him around and you try to figure out each week where he would fit best. Van Ness I think he's going to test really well at the combine too. So I'm not saying that elite athleticism is not there. It very well could be there. But just watching him bull rush people, he's that big, strong defensive lineman, especially if he adds 15, 20 pounds, gets up to 290 or so. And that's not going to happen over one spring or summer, Brian. I mean, that's going to happen over time. But if he does that, I see him more in the mold of like an Aaron Smith or a Cam Hayward down the road.
That makes sense. The Steelers really haven't replaced Stephon Tuitt necessarily. Larry Ogunjobi's kind of done that. Like you said, DeMarvin Leal is somebody who you can put him on the field in a lot of different packages probably and get something out of him. So before we move on to the rest of your mock, last topic that I wanted to touch on with this first round for you. Who else did you consider, Ray? Can you pull back the curtain a little bit for those who are diving deeper on your mock draft by listening to this show? Who were you kind of down to in the very end before you settled on a guy in Van Ness who it's early in the process? A lot's going to change. Like you said, there will be testing numbers from the combine. Teams will talk themselves in and out of players. He could go higher than this. Ultimately, he could go later than this. Who else were you kind of jockeying with there at the end?
Yeah, what I try to do with these mock drafts, especially the early ones, is kind of use it as an exercise of, okay, and for this one, it was, okay, if Joey Porter is not there at 17, and I don't know if you agree with me, but I think a lot of people would. It would make a lot of sense for the Steelers to take Joey Porter, right? Yeah. They are extremely familiar with him. They know more details on Joey Porter Jr. than any other team in this draft.
They watched him grow up. They need his position.
Yeah, he grew. I mean, he was practicing with the team at St. Vincent College back in 2016 or 17, whenever that was. He was at the facility every day after practice with Dino Tomlin. So the Steelers also need a number 1 cornerback. So if he is there at 17, I wouldn't be surprised if Joey Porter is the pick. Now, building off of that, how about if one of those 3 offensive tackles, falls? I wouldn't be surprised at all if an offensive tackle like Broderick Jones from Georgia is the pick, if he would fall to 17. But for this first mock draft, I was saying the 3 left tackles were gone: Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, and Peter Skoronski. And I was saying Joey Porter was gone. Okay, if that happens, okay, they need a defensive lineman. This guy could be there. That was my thinking on Lukas Van Ness in mock draft number 1.
Fair enough. All right, we're going to get into the rest of Ray's mock draft in the second segment here on the show. But first, hey, Yinzers, listen up. The Steelers campaign is off and running, and you're going to want to show your support for whoever they do draft next in this first round. It's easy with 2 legendary shops in the Strip, plus a growing online store. Yinzers in the Berg is the place to go for Pittsburgh sports, apparel, accessories, and much, much more. They will see you in the Strip, or you can check them out online. You can shop at yinzerspgh.com. That's yinzerspgh.com. Maybe you'll be picking up a Van Ness jersey if Ray can see the future here with his mock draft. But maybe you also want one of these guys that Ray has slated to the Steelers here in rounds 2 through 7. Let's get into that when we come back. Man, I've been trying to tell them, Ray, that if I'm going to step in for Chris and host this show, we either need to, change the little graphic so that it says North Shore Drive with Brian Batko, or Chris needs to throw me some sort of, finder's fee or what have you, a cut of his, promotions, whatever he's got going on the side. I think that's only fair.
I do. You got to get after that, Brian. Get a little extra time.
Yeah, I'll check with the bosses. Maybe I'll work out a deal with Chris like NFL players when they switch jersey numbers or something. So we'll see what kind of compensation comes back to me in this deal. But all right, let's get into some more draft talk. We'll get to the Super Bowl in the third segment today. But we've got to get to the other guys that you had mocked to the Steelers. Moving on to the second round, like you said before. You were tempted to go with a defensive back, specifically a corner, or an offensive lineman. You gave the Steelers both of those in round 2, starting with pick 32, which, most years, the majority of years, is a first-round pick, which they got from the Bears for Chase Claypool. A jack-of-all-trades type of DB, Antonio Johnson of Texas A&M, tall, rangy, can play physical, seems to have pretty good ball skills, even if the numbers aren't necessarily there. Are all those kind of the factors that led you to this 6'3", 200-pounder for the Aggies?
Yeah, so here's my thinking on this one, Brian. Terrell Edmonds is an unrestricted free agent. DeMonte KZ is an unrestricted free agent. And as good as Arthur Maulet has been in his role the last couple of seasons, he's kind of a part-time guy, right? He's more.
Yeah, the Steelers haven't obviously thought that much of him, considering how much his playing time has fluctuated.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who plays, depending on the week, I don't know what his end of the season numbers were, 25, 30% of the snaps over a season. So, you kind of have slot corner and potentially safety that will be where you could use upgrades this year, or where you might have a hole. So Johnson can fill any of those roles. You remember by the end of the season, once KZ came back off IR, how much they were using 3 safeties in certain game plans depending on the opponent. And they really liked that defense. So let's say, okay, I don't know which one would command more on the open market. Let's say that's Edmonds. So let's say Edmonds signs elsewhere, KZ comes back. You draft a guy like Antonio Johnson, he could play slot corner for you some weeks. He can play a hybrid guy like Terrell Edmonds did when KZ came back from IR. So there's all sorts of different things that they could do. Steelers really like versatile defensive backs. Cam Sutton was that guy for years until he got a job full-time on the outside. So I think he's another guy. He might not have a true position, but I think he would contribute right away. He would play a lot of snaps as a rookie if that's the pick.
Yeah, I hear you. And the other thing that we should point out, it's difficult to do mock drafts at any time, but especially in early February when free agency hasn't happened yet. We don't know who's going to be back in the Steelers secondary. Cam Sutton, Terrell Edmonds, DeMonte KZ, 1, 2, all, none of those guys. We'll have a much better feel for when they'll want to pick a defensive back, what type of defensive back they'll want to pick once we get into mid to late March. But at least for right now, sound logic by you, Ray, that Johnson's the type of guy who they could put him just about anywhere and probably upgrade their secondary. Idea of him playing next to Minkah Fitzpatrick for years to come has to be pretty intriguing. Your other second rounder, the Steelers' original pick, 49th overall, a guy that you did lay eyes on, and I guess you really liked him down in Alabama, DeJuan Jones of Ohio State. You're not the only one. When you're 6'8", 375, you've got the longest wingspan in Senior Bowl history, and you can move your feet pretty well. I was watching basketball highlights of this guy in high school. There's a lot of reason to invest in him as a piece on your offensive line who could probably come in right now and push people around, but at the very least, maybe, trim his physique up a little bit, learn the finer points of the position, continue to hone his craft, and be a starter for a long time in this league.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Brian, he wasn't on my second round radar before the Senior Bowl, but once I got down there, and I should point out, he didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, did not play in the game because of an injury, but during his one day of practice, he was so impressive. As you mentioned, 6'8", 375, he's going to be great in the run game in the NFL. But when you watch his feet, and you mentioned the basketball highlights, he moves like any left tackle in the league would. And he's only played right tackle at Ohio State because of Paris Johnson. So my question to him was, well, can you play left tackle? I mean, you got these feet. And he says, I haven't done it. I'm comfortable on the right side, but me watching him play and watching him move around the Senior Bowl, I don't see any reason why he couldn't play left or right in the NFL, which would really be ideal for the Steelers. Dan Moore and Chukwueze Okorafor, both 2 years remaining on your contract. Again, this is a guy who would come in, be the swing tackle at the very least right away, but potentially a guy who could start mid-season, maybe even earn a job before that. So, we'd have to see how it would pan out with him probably losing, 20 to 25 pounds. How would he be conditioning wise in the NFL? We all know Mike Tomlin is big on that, but I wouldn't call him a project. I just think a guy, he needs maybe a little bit more discipline in his diet, get him down to a manageable weight. And I think, he's at least a 3-year starter for you, after his rookie season.
And that's interesting because normally when you're trying to translate college prospects on the offensive line, to the NFL, it's kind of that hierarchy or totem pole, right? Where if you played left in college, you've got to be really good at it to stay there in the NFL. You might have to kick over to the right side. You might even move inside to guard if they don't think you have the length to keep NFL edge rushers off of you. If you played right tackle in college, yeah, you can probably do that in the NFL. But again, if you don't necessarily have the wingspan or, kind of the lateral quickness, you might have to move inside. If you played guard in college, you might have to move the center in the NFL. We saw that with Kendrick Green right here in Pittsburgh, which didn't exactly work out. So that's very intriguing to me that you think Jones can kind of be the rare case of a guy who his own college program. Now, again, like you alluded to, we're talking about Ohio State here, one of the very best and one that has their left tackle slated as a top 10 pick in this same draft. But his own college program didn't want him to play left tackle. They had him at right tackle. So that could be that'll be a teaching point for whether it's Pat Meyer here with the Steelers or another offensive line coach with a team that does ultimately draft him, because obviously any prospect has a lot more value the more versatile they are on the line. And if you can play left tackle, they'll give you a shot there and they'll figure out where you fall after that.
Length is not an issue for DeJuan Jones. 39.5-inch wingspan. He's got the wingspan of a guy who is 7'5". So left tackle, right tackle. The only issue would be, and this has changed a little bit in the NFL, the only issue would be a lot of times you're protecting the blind side, which he would be in Pittsburgh, but a lot of times the best pass rushers are on that side. So he would have to deal with the constant athleticism of the elite edge rushers in the NFL. So, we'd have to see how that goes. But, I'm really intrigued by him. I think as long as he loses some weight and as long as his conditioning is good, I think he's going to be a really good player in the NFL.
The Steelers have had, they've taken their shots on these humongous linemen. Al Villanueva had great success. Of course, he's an interesting case with his story. He's kind of the reverse of DeJuan Jones. He had to put weight on and figure out that aspect of the position. Zach Banner was somebody who didn't pan out, who was huge, but injuries slowed him down. They never really messed with him at left tackle. I don't know that he had the quickness or the lateral movement skills of DeJuan Jones. So they've done it, though. And we're going to talk about the Eagles in the next segment ahead of the Super Bowl. They've had success with humongous tackles when Andy Weidel was helping to put together their draft board. Jordan Mailata is one of the best in the league right now. And now he came from a rugby background, but he's a mountain of a man, and he's just smothering people for them at left tackle. So, all right, your third rounder, Byron Young. There's 2 Byron Youngs in this draft. So I appreciate you trying to thread the needle on that one. You've got the guy from Tennessee who's an edge rusher. The other one from Alabama is more of an interior defensive lineman, 6'4", 245. He had a good game against Pitt earlier this season, and that always seems to put guys on the Steelers' radar. But, to your point, Ray, if Van Ness is playing more on the defensive line in this universe, Byron Young steps in as that number 3 edge rusher behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Yeah,
the thing that stands out to me when I watch him, fast, athletic, and has a great motor. And, people might look at the frame, 6'2", 245. How does that translate to your prototypical Steelers 3-4 outside linebacker? He's not like that big 6'4", 255 guy, but I don't see any reason why he couldn't get up to 250, even 255, maintain that athleticism. He's always going to have the motor. And I think it's perfect for the Steelers. They've been searching for that good number 3 outside linebacker for quite some time. They tried it with Melvin Ingram. We all know how that worked out. This past year, they tried to bring Malik Reed in. They traded a 6th-round pick for him. That didn't work out. He was a healthy scratch by the end of the season. So they have to upgrade there. And listen, they don't have 5th and 6th round picks. So if you're going to get an edge rusher, Brian, you're probably not going to get him in free agency. It's got to be in the top 4 rounds. And this is just kind of, Byron Young is kind of in that range, 3rd or 4th round range. I didn't think they can get him like in the 120s. So I went ahead and put him in there at number 80.
Yeah, and he's an older guy, as you pointed out. So you'd want to get your best football out of him right away. We'll finish up here with your 4th round pick, because you went back to the O-line. Olu Oluwatimi of Michigan, a center. Do you think that, this would be more of a developmental pick, or at best, he's ready to play right away and Mason Cole can maybe move to a guard spot? I guess either way, you're creating more competition. You're getting younger on an offensive line that's, probably, still a little bit in reconstruction or rebuild mode here to protect Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the contracts on that offensive line. J.C. Hassenauer, unrestricted free agent. Their top swing tackle, Trenton Scott, unrestricted free agent. So I think there's going to be some change there in terms of who the backups are. But you also have to look at how they structured those big free agent contracts with James Daniels and Mason Cole. Both only 3-year deals. They both have 2 years left. And if you know Mason Cole's background, Brian, he played more guard with the Vikings and the Cardinals than he did center. Now, the Steelers like him at center. I thought he did a good job at center. But if you bring this guy in as a developmental guy, hey, let's say he's not ready in 2023, but he pushes in 2024, Mason Cole can still bump out, play guard for a year. At the worst case, let's say you find another guard who could start. The worst case, he is a mid-priced, very good interior backup if he's bypassed by the time we get to 2024. So they got to start doing this. They got to start getting younger on the offensive line. Hassenauer has been a nice little story, kind of worked his way up from practice squad guy. What was he, XFL or
AAF, the Alliance of American Football, yeah.
I mean, he's kind of been a nice story here, but I just don't know what his future is in the NFL. So get younger, start to develop some guys, and I think that's kind of the range where he's probably going to go in that 4th or 5th round range. I thought, hey, Steelers, why not give him to the Steelers and see if he's a good pick for them.
Yeah, and then your last couple picks, 7th rounders, a tight end from Purdue, and Pitt inside linebacker, Servassier Dennis. Pitt fans would want to see him go higher than that, but obviously they'd be thrilled to see him go to the Steelers if they're also Steeler fans. All right, Ray, let's get into Super Bowl, LVII between the Eagles and the Chiefs. We will preview that next in our final segment of the show, touching on some local connections with both teams, and then also we'll give our picks on the game when we come back. All righty, Ray. I'm pretty pumped for this game. I don't know about you. I think it's a really good matchup. I did not watch last year's Super Bowl really much at all because I was on a plane to Hawaii for vacation with the family. I don't have any plans yet for this year. Now that we have two kids, we're not really thinking past like the next day. So yeah, so I don't know where we're going to be watching it, what we're going to be doing for it. But I think it's going to be a really fun matchup. And as I said before the break there, plenty of people with Pittsburgh ties, both locally, the Whitfield, the local colleges, and former Steelers going to be in this game.
Yeah, you got Javon Hargrave, who, Stephon Tuitt. They decided to keep Stephon Tuitt instead of Javon Hargrave. I can't fault the Steelers for that. They had no idea that Tuitt was going to have the issues that he had late in his career here. Hargrave's, he might be their best defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Then you go over to the Chiefs. You got Justin Watson, who might get a chance to play in this game. The Chiefs have some injuries at receiver. And then Juju Smith-Schuster. Listen, Brian, I know that he kind of became a caricature of himself late in his tenure here. No one ever talked about that guy being a bad teammate. I thought he was a good teammate. And people shouldn't forget, and I know people might because they got their doors blown off in that playoff game against the Chiefs. But he came back from a very bad shoulder injury, tried to give his team a spark. He was out there for, 20, 30 snaps. I thought, he's the guy you want to have on your team, and I'm kind of rooting for Juju to get a ring. Javon Hargrave, too. I think he's a good guy, but I think Juju kind of gets a bad rap around here sometimes.
Yeah, Juju and Justin Watson, as well as Sky Moore in the Chiefs receiving core. Shadyside Academy, New Kensington native. A lot of people thought that it was a slam dunk. The Steelers would pick him in the second round last year, given the connection to Dino Tomlin, Mike Tomlin, the Tomlin family. They instead went with this guy named George Pickens. It's looking like that's going to be a good move for them in the long run. But yeah, I mean, I think all three of those guys, Juju's got to get healthy. He was knocked out of the AFC Championship game with a knee, I believe. So hopefully he'll be able to go. If not, Patrick Mahomes will have one fewer option in his passing arsenal to go to. I also think it's, you've got Miles Sanders on the Philly side. Yeah, Eagles top running back, had a couple touchdowns in the NFC Championship game. Woodland Hills' own. You've got, people in the front office, Brandon Hunt, who spent a long time here with the Steelers as their director of scouting. Now he's got just about the same title over in Philly. We know that's where Andy Weidel came from. It kind of ended up being a trade between the two organizations. And I think it's going to be interesting to, watch how this game plays out. If the Eagles continue to follow their same formula and script in which they dominate the line of scrimmage, easier said than done when you've got Chris Jones over there for the Chiefs, Creed Humphrey on the other side, snapping to Mahomes. But if they can just overwhelm them physically, kind of the way I guess the Buccaneers did a few years back when the Chiefs kind of realized, all right, we really need to fortify ourselves in the trenches. If the Eagles can do that and, maybe they win a low-scoring game or maybe they just, assert their will, I think it's going to be yet another sign that that's sort of what the Steelers are trying to build here with Weidel now as their assistant GM. And not only that, Ray, but one other storyline that kind of jumped out at me this week. I was reading a headline about Eagles GM Howie Roseman. I believe he was voted as the Pro Football Writers of America's GM of the year this year for what he's done with that team. He was, before he got that title in Philly, he was the cap guy for the Eagles. And that's exactly what the Steelers have done with Omar Khan replacing Kevin Colbert. Now, they've got a football guy behind him. It's the same guy that Howie Roseman had behind him and Andy Weidel. So all you hear about Roseman really when you're reading Philly articles is he's duping people in trades. He's fleecing other teams. He's amassing all these picks. He's using them on the right positions. Omar Khan's off to a pretty good start with the Chase Claypool deal with the Bears. So I'm not saying the Steelers are going to be able to, find themselves in the Super Bowl after making all these genius moves, but it's working for the Eagles with a guy who didn't exactly have the most X's and O's chops.
Yeah, listen, they've had an unbelievable year. I think Philadelphia has the best roster 1 through 53 in the NFL.
Yeah.
Now I will say this. They're not going to be playing the New York Giants, and they're not going to be playing the San Francisco 49ers with Josh Johnson or some invisible quarterback that, that situation that unfolded in the championship game. So,
right.
Every team is fortunate, in a run to the Super Bowl. This happens. They're not going to be able to win this game with Jalen Hurts throwing for $150. You and I saw what Jalen Hurts can do in the passing game. He tore the Steelers apart.
Yeah.
Now, he hasn't always been consistent, especially in the second half of the season. I'm not sure what's going on with that passing game right now, but he has that in him. So if they are going to win this game, I fully expect – listen, Steve Spagnuolo is a terrific defensive coordinator. He's going to have something drawn up where he forces Jalen Hurts to beat them in the passing game, and I think we're going to have to see whether that happens or not. So that's sort of like the chess game that I'm looking at right now. Everyone's talking about Mahomes, and rightfully so. But I think that Chiefs defense against that Eagles offense, I think that matchup is going to determine who wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and other teams have found ways to exploit that Chiefs defense in big games. The Bengals had owned them until this most recent matchup between the two. Joe Burrow was just throwing lasers on that secondary Steve Spagnuolo system. So Jalen Hurts, yeah, he's got to do that as well. AJ Brown is for my money one of the best receivers in the league. We also saw what he can do. I think he could have a potentially like Super Bowl MVP type of performance if he goes out there and just cooks these Chiefs defensive backs. Talent-wise, on paper, he very much has the potential to do that. So, the Eagles are a team that, you want to talk about the way they've built this roster and turned things around relatively quickly. That's what it looks like in the standings, and that's what it looks like when you hire Nick Sirianni and you promote him, and you get to your second year with him, and all of a sudden you hit the ground running. But this has been a long time coming. They've used a lot of draft picks on offensive linemen. They haven't necessarily minded kind of drafting over a starter, if you will. They've got a first-round pick as their swing tackle right now, and Andre Dillard from Washington State. So they've really invested in that. They've made shrewd moves in free agency. They've made some shrewd trades. It's just all coming together for them right now. And, of course, the biggest piece of that, Jalen Hurts playing out of his mind for most of this year. So, I think it's going to be a really good matchup. I am going to go with the Eagles here, Ray. Just judging by your response, I don't know if you're with me, but I'm going to say the Eagles put forth a pretty smothering defensive performance. Avonte Maddox from Pitt, their slot corner, I've seen all sorts of advanced metrics talking about his value. He's got to get healthy too. He's got a lingering toe issue that he fought through in the NFC title game, but he could be key in this one as well. I'm going to say Eagles 26, Chiefs 20.
Ooh, we have similar scores. I'm going to go with the upset. Chiefs 27, Eagles 24. And
I don't really think of that as an upset, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's the betting line is what it is, and Mahomes' ankle's not right, but I still think there's just a lot of football observers out there who are like, until somebody's going to knock off Patrick Mahomes this season, we're going to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it's in these situations. And listen, there's been plenty of great quarterbacks who have lost Super Bowls, but usually it's like, okay, Marino lost to Montana, Staubach lost to Bradshaw. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts isn't here, but Patrick Mahomes is up here, right? So just looking at the quarterback matchup and seeing the way that Mahomes gutted through that last week, I just get the idea he's going to carry them on his back. This is going to kind of be like his signature moment. He played well late in that first Super Bowl win against the 49ers a couple of years ago. Obviously, didn't play great against the Buccaneers. I just got a feeling Mahomes is going to step up, have a huge game, just kind of put them on their back, on his back, and I think the Chiefs will get it done.
It's going to be a fun weekend. We're recording this on Thursday morning, so there was a lot that happened, I'm sure, last night that we didn't touch on, but we can always get to that early next week. So we don't know what happened with Cam Hayward. We know he was nominated for Walter Payton Man of the Year. If he won, congrats. If he didn't, I'm sure he will be back in the running this time next year. Hall of Fame, selections announced. So will we have a local person in there? We will see. Darrelle Revis, first chance on the ballot from Aliquippa and Pitt. And beyond that, enjoy the game, everybody. Hope you've got a good spread of food. Hope you've got some fun, some fun plans for it, some good people to watch with. Ray, I will talk to you at some point next week, although I guess it might be each of us individually with Carter back from vacation. So should be a good time. Glad we were able to reunite here and bring back sort of the original Steelers podcast from the Post-Gazette. We've got stories coming out as well. I've got one, speaking of Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, who's had kind of a meteoric rise. I drove down to Washington, PA, talked to his oldest brother, Mike Sirianni, who, if you know anything about small college football here in Western PA, he's the winningest coach all time at Washington and Jefferson, a legend in the President's Athletic Conference. He was gracious enough to give me some time to talk about this whirlwind that it's been for their family and specifically for their baby brother. So make sure to check that out on the Post-Gazette website. Alrighty, Ray. Did you have a good time doing this for old time's sake? Just like old times. It was fun. Absolutely. Alrighty, folks. Thanks as always for tuning in. Carter will be back soon. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.